Hey there, internet friends, and welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions of the thing. If you like the show, please feel free to subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. If you don't like the show, well, thank you for listening anyway. Joining me today, we have Frank Bazzani. How you doing, Frank?
I'm doing good. I'm just looking forward to chatting with this one about you. Or I think other way around there,
Yeah.
chatting about this one with you.
Yeah.
And so I just definitely, I've had some thoughts, so I'm curious to see where you're at on it too.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. For our video viewers, we ran into some issue just trying, like with Discord, trying to get Frank's video to pull in on my side. So that's why we don't have Frank video-wise this week. We just have his friendly little avatar there in the screen. But other than that, the show will go on. And yeah, today we're kicking off our holiday season 2021 month of content here on That D Plus Show. Basically, we're going to do these first couple episodes as sequel episodes to last year. And so last year, we kicked the month off with the Santa Claus on our December 4th, 2020 episode of That D Plus Show. So we are doing the sequel here today. The Santa Claus 2 is what we're going to be talking about today. A very fun little one. History lesson on this. Originally released November 1st, 2002, a good 8 years after the original Santa Claus. So it was very much like Tim Allen must be looking for something to do now, I guess.
He needs a check. That rent is due.
and you definitely see it when the movie opens up with Charlie and just being like, oh, that's the same kid, but he is way older now.
Oh yeah.
We were talking a little bit before we started recording. Next week we'll be doing Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, and that sequel was filmed much more, much quicker after the original Home Alone. So there wasn't that giant gap between those two movies like there was between these two. It's just one of those fascinating things, and presumably next year we'll come back and do the Santa Claus 3, which I don't think I've ever actually seen.
It's all right.
That one came out a couple years later,
Yep.
in the timeline as well, but not another 8-year gap between episodes of the film there, or whatever. Installments, that's the word I was looking for. Other notable releases of the time here in 2002, we had I believe the Western premiere, at least, of Spirited Away came out September 20th. We had The Ring came out October 18th. Jackass the movie came out October 25th. Yeah. And it's just seeing these things puts it all kind of in perspective of that time in my life. Like I said before we started recording, I'm a senior in high school when this one comes out already. So I'm basically halfway through my senior year almost. So it's yep, that Jackass movie, that was my senior year as well. Yep.
At this point, I would have been in elementary school, but I did enjoy Jackass the movie, and The Ring terrified me. So that's where I was at in about 2002, 2003 when this was coming out, and after a little bit afterwards.
You had Home Alone 4, Taking Back the House, which was one of those basically straight to DVD or straight to TV, made for TV versions of Home Alone. That came out November 3rd. I forgot to put that in the doc, but I just looked that up. November 3rd. And just again, with these two installments kind of being our back-to-back kickoffs of our holiday seasons, it's just funny thinking of oh yeah, by the time Santa Claus 2 was rolling around, they were on to the fourth Home Alone, which I believe had the third different kid.
Yep. And French Stewart, I think.
Did this one have French Stewart? I know French Stewart was in the third one. I don't know if he's
I might be wrong about that.
Yeah, I don't think he's in the fourth one. But maybe. Let me look this one up. This one has French Stewart in it. Yep. French Stewart and Missy Pyle nice. in this one. So maybe they weren't in the third one. But yeah. Don't know if we'll ever make it to that one in our watch through of these things, but maybe.
I would almost be fascinated to see the third and the fourth movies because
Yeah.
I love the first two, and I've never seen either of those. We had the third one on VHS when I was a kid, but I never watched it because I was like, "This isn't Macaulay Culkin."
Yeah,
I was
right.
Like, as a kid, I didn't want to watch it because of that.
Because it was like the same kid who like would also play, I think, Dennis the Menace. I think around that time. And like I definitely know I've seen the third one at some point, but yeah, it definitely did not have like the same staying power that the Macaulay Culkin ones did. Also in this block here, we had 8 Mile came out November 8th, that iconic Eminem film. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets was on its
hell yeah.
so yeah, Harry Potter was up to its second installment there, November 15th of 2002. Just because of course we have our, our Bond, our number 2 Bond fan here on the site with you, Frank, on the chat on the show today. Die Another Day came out November 22nd. And then
Pierce Brosnan's last adventure is Bond, and we didn't get another Bond for like 3 or 4 years until Casino Royale.
Yep. And then we had The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers came out December 18th. So busy.
I didn't realize that was like a Christmas movie. Is that why so many people watch Lord of the Rings around like Christmas? I never really put that together.
I mean, yeah, there's nothing in the movie that is like, this is a Christmas movie, but they did like launch kind of in the holiday season when they would come out every year. Because yeah, Fellowship of the Ring came out, I think November, December, a couple years earlier, and then Return of the King also would come out, I believe it was a December release. So yeah, it was just kind of like they were taking up that big like, let's like, this will be the movie that families will go see during the holidays, when they need to not be, having conversations with one another. So yeah, that might be why people have kind of like subconsciously carried that on into a tradition. Film has a runtime of 1 hour and 44 minutes. In the Disney live action timeline of things, as I said, the first Santa Claus came out way back in 1994, November 11th, 1994. But closer to this, you had Tuck Everlasting had come out October 11th of 2002. Then the Santa Claus 2 there, November 1st. And then the next one, speaking of French Stewart, would be Inspector Gadget 2, came out March 11th, 2003, where French Stewart took on the role of Inspector Gadget from Matthew Broderick, who played it in the original. Also around here, Holes came out April 18th of 2003. And then
it's a great movie.
Like putting Santa Claus 2 in the context of Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl came out July 9th, 2003. It's just like, wow. Like those feel to me like such different eras of movies.
Absolutely.
So it's weird to realize they were like 6 months apart.
And because like I know the Santa Claus 2 was in 2002, which is obviously still like early 2000s. It's still kind of so late 90s. But if you were like, yeah, this takes place in like 1998, like there, like it feels like a 90s kind of thing to me, at least for sure. Especially because I know we'll get into favorite moments in a bit, but when they come in with the old like 90s McDonald's bags, when they get I was like, oh, those are those old like McDonald's bags I haven't seen in like 20 years. Like it's just a weird nostalgia thing.
Yeah.
So I was like, I just think of this movie feels so much older than like Pirates of the Caribbean does.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's an element of that is like putting you back into when the first movie came out in 94. Like you don't think that there was an 8-year gap between those two movies. So you think it was like a mid 90s movie because it's like, oh, the first movie came out. The second one probably came out a couple years later in the mid 90s. Nope, it did not. So yeah, it's mind trickery. It's that the Mandela effect. For the roll call here, the director, we have Michael Lembeck taking over directing duties on this one. He had done a lot of TV prior to this, including a number of episodes of the show Mad About You, as well as 24 episodes of Friends. He would go on afterwards to direct the Santa Claus 3, The Escape Clause as well. So he kind of came on for these last two of the Santa Claus films. The writers here had 5 screenwriters, or 5 people working on the screenplay on this one, which like really boils down to 3 teams basically. There was Don Reimer, he's another one who had done some TV beforehand. Afterwards, he would go on to write Agent Cody Banks 2, Destination
Hell
London,
yeah.
as well as the films Surf's Up and Rio. We have the writing team of Cinco Paul and Ken Dario, who prior to this had written Bubble Boy, and they would go on to write the Despicable Me movies as well as the Lorax, and then most recently I enjoyed their work on Schmigadoon.
Wow.
On Apple TV. They wrote that series very recently, and then Ed Decter and John J. Strauss were the other team of screenwriters there, who prior to this wrote There's Something About Mary, and then afterwards would go on to write the Lizzie McGuire movie. So like I feel like that is three very different like brands of comedy.
Yeah.
Like in like super mature, guy jizzes in his hand and it creates a phenomenon of Cameron Diaz's hair, and then we have this movie, and then the Lizzie McGuire movie, like as Disney Channel as you can get from there. So like very like very stark differences, I would say there.
I almost just wonder, like, did they get the gig because of Something About Mary, or did they not know about something about Mary?
I mean, yeah, like I imagine Tim Allen, as having the sway that he had, probably like was like, yeah, I'm keen on working with those guys. I thought that movie was funny or something like that. Seems like he would have been perfectly fine with that, mentality. And it was just like more of a, like maybe they're the ones in this that kind of like sneak in the like adult humor that, is going to fly over kids' heads or something like that. Because I mean, like even that, like I remember like when I would first see Something About Mary, I didn't really know what it was about. It was just like a funny sight gag of like, oh, something's making her hair stick up. Oops. Yeah. Anyway, and then they're credited here for the story and because they had created the characters, but also you had Leo Benvenuti and Steve Rudnick on the story of this one, who we shouted out last year when we did this. Their other experiences, they'd worked on the Dennis Miller Show, and then they would also go on to write Space Jam as well. Starring, I've broken out into kind of our returning cast as well as our new cast of characters. In returning, we of course have Tim Allen there playing Scott Calvin, aka Santa Claus, who of course, best known for his work on Home Improvement, as Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story, Galaxy Quest. Most recently, he was on the series Last Man Standing. We have Judge Reinhold playing Neil again, having done Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Beverly Hills Cop movies. We have Wendy Crewson returning as Laura, who did The Good Son as well as Air Force One. Eric Lloyd back as Charlie, who we highlighted last time, had done an episode of The Wonder Years. He was also in Dunstan Checks In and the Brave Little Toaster movies for a while. And then he would also play young Bruce in Batman and Robin, in one of those infamous pearl clutching scenes. David Krumholtz comes back as Bernard, who, of course, was also in Addams Family Values, as well as Serenity and the series Numbers. And I count him in here as a returning performer, even though he's playing a different character this time around. But Peter Boyle, who was like Scott's boss the last time around, is back time as Father Time. And also,
I never even put that together, that he's just the same guy.
Yeah. Same actor, different characters.
Right.
But yeah, he's back as Father Time this time around. Of course, iconic as Frankenstein in Young Frankenstein, or the monster in Young Frankenstein. And then, of course, from Everybody Loves Raymond. And then new to the cast, we have Spencer Breslin playing Curtis. He was kind of that kid for kind of this era of films. He was in The Kid. He was also in The Cat in the Hat and The Shaggy Dog, and he will return in Santa Claus 3. We have Elizabeth Mitchell playing Carol. She had done some ER before this. She will also return in Santa Claus 3. And I this is one of those things, like, I remember her now from Lost. because
Mm.
she plays not Kate, Juliet. She plays Juliet in Lost. Um, and I remember her from that a ton. And then she would go on to do some other kind of sci-fi shows like V and Revolution. But yeah, so seeing her pop up in this, be like, oh hey, that's from Lost. It was very weird realizing, oh, I had seen her in this years before Lost. But yeah, we have Liliana Mummy playing the little girl Lucy. She was another one of kind of the kids of the moment, where she was also in the Cheaper by the Dozen 1 and 2 movies with Steve Martin there. She's also in not the first Lilo and Stitch, but she was in Lilo and Stitch 2, as well as the Lilo and Stitch series, voicing a character. She will come back in Santa Claus 3 as well. And then she was in the Powerpuff Girls Z series as Bubbles. She also has just like a bunch of other like voice credits to her name in more recent years, but those were the ones that jumped out to me. Art LaFleur playing the Tooth Fairy here, who probably iconic to a number of people as Babe Ruth in The Sandlot. He's also like looking through his credits. I was like, oh, that was him. He's in the JTT movie with Man of the House, which I believe is also Chevy Chase, which I remember like loving as a kid because it's all about the like the the Indian guides, now no longer a PC term, but yeah, that like he's in there and he's like the troop leader of that group in that. He will also return in the Santa Claus 3. And I believe I want to double check this before I say so, but I believe, yeah, he sadly just recently passed away in this past November at the age of 78. So yeah, when I was looking him up, I was like, oh, it's sad that he like, just November 17th he passed away. So good long life for him though, 78 years old. And he's really fun in this one. We have Aisha Tyler in one of her early film roles, playing Mother Nature here. She, of course, will also come back in as the Santa Claus 3, and it, of course, is probably best known to audiences these days for her work on stuff like Archer, or the TV show Criminal Minds, or as kind of the new version of Drew Carey in the more recent Whose Line Is It Anyway series. Or, for fans of video games, she hosted a bunch of Ubisoft press conferences for a while there. We have Kevin Pollock playing Cupid, who's kind of another one of those character actors. He'd done A Few Good Men. He was also in Wayne's World 2, Grumpy Old Men, The Usual Suspects, That Thing You Do, as well as he would go on to be in the Whole 9 and Whole 10 Yards movies with Bruce Willis. Michael Dorn playing the Sandman there, just throwing that in as a fun little cameo. Of course, playing probably best known as Worf from the Star Trek Next Generation cast of characters. We have Molly Shannon in a little cameo here as Tracy.
She's great.
Yeah. She, of course, had done Saturday Night Live for many years, as well as Superstar. She was also in How the Grinch Stole Christmas and Wet Hot American Summer. All of those things happened before this. It was very much like when she popped up, I was like, oh, is this like, catching her like right at the beginning of her like, SNL fame? Like, no, she was already pretty much done with SNL by this point, and is just kind of like a fun, pop-up role for her. And then the last one I want to shout out here, very minor role, but it is Blue Mancuma playing John Pierce, aka like the first teacher at the teacher party that gets a gift. And just giving him a shout out because he was in Halloween Town 2, which we discussed a couple months ago.
So that was that guy, because I saw him and I was like, he looks like the guy from Halloween Town 2, but he's not wearing the like weird makeup in the suit and stuff. And I was like, man, okay, I'm glad I was validated and I wasn't just like wildly off base.
Yeah, no, we talked about it when we did that episode of like, oh yeah, he'll be popping back up on because I had seen like in pulling the credits for Halloween 10 2 that he was also in Santa Claus 2. I was like, I don't remember who that character is, but I'll throw it in there. So yeah, I wanted to kind of close the loop on that. Yes, he was who's like the troll or whatever in Halloween Town 2. I forget the character's name. But yes, here he's playing like he's basically like in Halloween Town 2, he plays like the mean troll, and then he plays like the very black and white bland version of that character. And he's very much basically playing that again, but here as the real character there. So yeah, just a shout out there to Blue Man Kuma.
I thought he did like a great job in this because I know, like you said, it's basically the same character, but he's really good at that, like being the stoic. And then all of a sudden he's so happy and he's like tossing the gift around, and he's like, and I was like, man, I love this guy. He's such a weird, like good, like little extra actor to have. But I did want to give a quick shout out to just like the entire cast, because like I thought like everybody in this movie is actually like really good. Like they got a lot of like notable people either from like at the time or who became notable afterwards. And watching it, I felt like everybody was doing like a really good job, and a lot of people just seemed like they were having fun. Like Tim Allen seemed like he was just living it up out there. Yeah, especially when he was walking around the toy shop, just like talking to all the kids, and like I was like, man, he's having a great time.
Yeah, especially when he's like plastic toy Santa. He's just like, yep, he's having fun as like the best of both worlds kind of thing. I will say, I will agree with you, with the exception of like some of the kids feel like real rough. But that's kind of to be expected. It was like the little girl who does like the hot cocoa and stuff. I was like, oh, the little girl who did the hot cocoa the first time around, I thought was like way better. Judy from the first movie. But she, of course, would have been, like a teen by this time, or maybe in her early 20s or something like that. So, it makes sense to not bring her back. But yeah, some of those kids felt a little rocky, apart from I would say apart from really like Curtis. Like he's the one who kind of comes in. Like even Charlie is like, oh, like you kind of like. There's kind of probably a reason you were like that kid for like that moment in time and didn't really stick with it. Just because it was a little rough. Oh, also I think that like the little girl is also really cute. The cousin or whatever. She does a good job there as well. But yeah, other than that, like all the adults having fun, having a good time, and yeah, just a fun, joyous, magical spirit of a movie kind of thing.
I love Judge Reinhold in these movies too. I mean, I guess I just love him in general, but like he's kind of the straight man, but he's like really funny in these movies.
Yeah, and this one in particular, where he's like it's like I thought like that's a very sexy sweater or whatever. He keeps talking about how sexy the sweater is, and he like the wife's just like we'll talk later. It's like I thought you thought that was my sexy sweater. No. Yeah, it was a fun little recurring gag there. Some trivia here. Toy Santa's line, "You are a sad, strange little man," is of course also used by Tim Allen as Buzz Lightyear in the Toy Story series. And additionally, when Toy Santa says, "I think Santa feels a little buzz," it's from him being Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story. A little tongue-in-cheek reference there. As I mentioned, Peter Boyle, who plays Father Time in this film, previously played Mr. Whittle, Calvin's boss in the first Santa Claus. When Scott captures the Tooth Fairy and tells him he is Santa, the Tooth Fairy, doubting that Scott is Santa Claus, tells him, "I know Santa. Santa is a friend of mine, and you, sir, are no Santa." This is a parody of Lloyd Benson's famous retort to Dan Quayle during the 1988 U.S. vice presidential debate. And then I combined a whole bunch of like little one-off things here for this kind of last little bit of trivia, because it's a whole bunch of the lasts. This is the last Santa Claus film to feature David Krumholtz as Bernard. He will apparently not be back next time around. This is also weird. The last Santa Claus film to feature a gradual change between Santa Claus and Scott Calvin. This is the last film in the Santa Claus series to end with Santa flying off into the night sky riding his sleigh. And then this one was just like the funniest one to me. This is the last Santa Claus film where Judge Reinhold is dubbed by Christian Tremitz in the German dubbing. Somebody put that into IMDb, and I was like, you know what? Nobody has found this interesting in IMDb, but I'm going to go ahead and pull it onto this podcast. I definitely feel like that was an IMDb entry written by Christian Tremitz, frustrated that he did not get brought back for the Judge Reinhold character in the Santa Claus 3.
Oh, 100%. Like if you use the Wayback Machine, I'm sure it originally said like, despite doing a great job, he was not brought back for the third movie.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Reminds me of one of those trivia things that we had back when I did the Mighty Ducks. Like one of them was like almost very clearly written by one of the actors because it was like, this was so and so's favorite scene, and the guy was like the goalie of the bad guys team or something like that. I was like, you had like 2 lines in the movie, dude. But sure, go in and like create an IMDb account and add some trivia onto those movies. Knock yourself out.
Yeah, he's probably like, this is my favorite scene because I'm in this one.
Yeah. So yeah, that is gonna do it for the trivia. So I will throw it to you, Frank. How does this movie hold up for you? What'd you think?
Yeah, yeah. So I definitely think this movie holds up. Like I thought it was still just like a fun, good time, and maybe it was just like the mood I watched it in. But it was definitely like it hit the right way. Like it was just heartful in like a good way, where especially like it's a weird scene to call out, I guess. But when he gives the Christmas party at the faculty party, when he does give them all the gifts, and like everybody's so happy, like everybody's so like sad and stoic, and then everybody's so happy, and they're all playing games with each other and stuff.
Mhm.
And I was like, it's just such like that classic, like it hits all those classic Christmas movie vibes, especially with like the multiple people who have like lost the like the meaning of Christmas and lost a lot of that happiness and excitement. And then just like, the classic movie thing of him being able to bring that back for a lot of people, like, I think it just hits the right way. And I think it is just like on top of that, I think it is a pretty like I still laughed at multiple things in the movie. Like I think it is still just like a funny movie. And when we talk about all the people who were the writers and the actors in this movie, like they had a bunch of great people really trying to just make a good movie. It wasn't just one of those things where they're like, we're just going to make a kids movie. Like they could have just done anything, but they actually tried to like do a really good movie. And like I said before too, like I think Tim Allen was just having a great time and
Mhm.
was just like having a lot of fun. I think a lot of the people were too. And if anything, maybe a lot of them were just excited to be back in the Santa Claus world, and he was just excited to have like the red coat on again.
Yeah.
But I like this movie a lot. I think I might like the first one a little bit more still. But I do think this one definitely holds up for sure.
Yeah, this was interesting. We were talking a little bit before we started recording about like kind of the comparison of like Home Alone versus Home Alone 2, and like Home Alone 2, as we'll talk about more next week, is very much like kind of a beat for beat copy of Home Alone 1, just in a different setting almost. And this one does kind of take chances. It is a different kind of thing. It's not a retread of, Scott Calvin like figuring out he wants to be Santa or how to be Santa. It's like he is Santa. He's been Santa for a while now and has been doing a good job as Santa. It's never really explained why he's been able to go without a Mrs. Claus for all those years, and suddenly now 8 years in or whatever he has to find a wife. But they definitely like they decide to take this movie in the direction of like a rom-com.
Mm.
And it's a fun it's a fun variation on the Santa Claus movie. And I don't know, I like, again, I don't think I've seen the escape clause, so I don't know necessarily what the next one's going to look like, or if I've seen it like once and clearly have forgotten about it. It did not leave an impression. But like I appreciate that like this one didn't just say like, okay, here's what worked from the first movie, let's do that again. It was like, how do we evolve on that, which is a good thing for a sequel to do. And so yeah, I appreciated that. Um, yeah, like I also love like the basically the date where he kind of like ends up using pretty much all of his magic in one go.
Yep.
And it was definitely one of those things like I feel like I remembered that being more spread out before. Like I feel like it was like, oh, he used like a little bit of magic, here and there. And I guess he kind of does, because like he first uses the magic and knows the little girl's name or whatever when she comes up to him. And then the rest of it is basically used on the date. But it definitely still felt like that probably could have been spread out a little bit, over a little bit more of the movie, instead of just like one incredibly magical evening for Carol to like fall in love with him. And then also just the like, it definitely, and they kind of lampshade it a little bit at the end of the film, but like the whole like premise of like, oh, you have a month to get married, and like her just going along with that and and just being like, all right, yeah, sure, I'll marry you like on Christmas Eve or whatever. It's like, I feel like if it were made today, they would like, it would have been a thing of like, okay, he has like all year, like they would have kind of like introduced this issue like Christmas of the last year or something like that, and then he would have had like a year to work while Toy Santa is like deteriorating and going like down the rabbit hole of being Mussolini in the North Pole, while to give like just more like realistic time frame of a meet cute into like a love story and all that stuff. But you know, for the sake of it, it's a Christmas movie. Sure, there's magic. It whatever. Um, she falls in love with him, and they get married within a month of meeting each other. Fine, whatever. We'll go with it. But
But
yeah,
I'm glad you say that though, because I'm totally with you on that. And I even had the same idea of like, why wasn't it over the whole year? And like, even if they like told him, and then he just kind of fucked around, like building toys and like they spent so much time at the beginning where he's just kind of not doing anything at the North Pole, and he's like playing football and he's doing other stuff, and it kind of sets up him being really good at Santa Claus, and it sets up some of the elements they bring back at the end of the film. But I was like, what if like wouldn't this have worked better if maybe this is like how he spent all year, like he just spent all year focusing on the Santa Claus stuff, and then at like then it was like, oh hey, and don't forget you also need to do this. But I also like where you're at, where like he could have spent the whole year with her, and you could also got like multiple holiday moments between the two of them, and not just like specifically the Christmas time. Because part of the thing that I just kind of had a problem with it, which I mean like it's a Christmas movie, but it's like the beginning is kind of slow, and they spend a lot of time doing stuff that just doesn't really like necessarily matter. Like they hit the big beats that set up the story, but there's a lot of just playing around and goofing around, and not necessarily like a comedic way. And then the end of the movie feels rushed.
yeah,
So it was totally like a thing where I'm like, you didn't really spend your time at like the beginning should be much faster, and I wish they would have just spent way more time at the North Pole at the end.
yeah. It's I mean like it's almost like like if you break it out into like a 3-act structure, first act is, you know, maybe a third of the movie. Second act, instead of just being the second third of the movie, is like, you know, from the end of the first act to like almost the end of the movie, and then yeah, the third act is just like very rushed. Okay, we're at the North Pole. We've you know, we've put down you know, Mussolini, Santa, and now we need to get married and save Christmas. And yeah, that like and the first act is so like it's more a series of sketches of like Tim Allen in the North Pole being Santa than it is feeding the plot. Like there's no real purpose to them playing football. Even like at the end, it doesn't really come back into like, okay, everybody, like let's use all those skills we used in the football to like take out these toy soldiers or whatever. They end up taking the toy soldiers out with like snowball stuff and all that stuff. So like, whatever.
It even kind of got me where like they do the tinsel on Santa Claus, and then the tinsel doesn't mean anything. They silly string
right.
Yeah. And I was like, what about the tinsel? Like,
yeah, it's like where was that elite squad of elves from the first movie that broke Charlie out of jail? Where were they in putting down Toy Santa? Yeah.
I would have loved a B plot with them where they were planning like a Santa assassination that got like ruined.
I mean, like
that, like they got all arrested and are in like the jail with Bernard. Like I would love that as like a B plot.
Yeah, that might have been a little dark, but you know, I see where you're going with that. Definitely incorporating them somehow in this world that they've, you know, established and created here would have been, I think, a fun opportunity that they kind of is just a missed opportunity. What do you think about the like angsty Charlie being on the naughty list, like subplot of the film?
I like that. Like, I'm totally with you where I don't know if that actor necessarily does the best job or kind of like carries his part of it as well. But I like that idea a lot because that's something you never necessarily really haven't like seen before, or at least I haven't besides this, where like Santa's own kid ends up on the naughty list, and like what a big deal that would be, or also why like, because it's even a thing of like he has the reaction that he's upset, but everyone else is like terrified to tell him, you know, like, or like when they have the list and everyone's just kind of looking around. And besides the fact that they're hiding the Mrs. Claus thing too, It's just like I could definitely like I like that idea. I just don't know if they executed on it super well. And I kind of also like the idea of it, them even trying to like, even though they maybe don't go all the way into it, they bring up that idea of like maybe he's like this because Scott's not around.
Mhm.
Like, you know, and I'm like, that's an interesting thing to kind of bring up and play around with and kind of definitely like try to talk about some of those issues. But then it just kind of, to me again, where it's rushed, it just wraps up with him being like, yeah, but I love you and I love Christmas and we all got to come together, you know?
Yeah.
Like he just kind of comes back to being the Charlie from the first movie, but like without any reason for like why he would have done that.
Yeah, that's what like because like his whole cathartic moment is like, my dad has the coolest job and I can't tell anybody and I have to live with that, and that's what's like turning him bad, is like he has to like hide that part of his life or whatever. It's like like it feels like that was like the weaker choice, whereas yeah, it would have been an interesting choice of the only way to get my dad, who has become now so consumed with being Santa Claus, to pay attention to me, is to get on the naughty list, is to act out, is to do this stuff. If it had been like a conscious choice, I think it would have been like a little bit more interesting. But yeah, it like somewhere along that kind of arc and plot, like they kind of miss a couple beats to that would have made it like a really cool examination of what that like relationship would look like, especially coupling it with his teacher or his principal being the love interest and kind of thing. And that like there's that like one scene where they're throwing snowballs at the house, whatever, and he learns that like his dad is dating her. um and there's like barely any resolution to that, even like his friend
Yeah.
kind of is like, oh, that's gross or whatever. And you get a little bit of like him confronting Scott about it, but not really in like a cathartic or kind of resort. Like it feels very like kind of surface, like, okay, of course that's going to be a conflict, but we gotta move past that. So Charlie will go teach the principal about like the magic and show her the snow globe, and they'll also somehow miraculously have the same idea to
Yeah.
get the tooth fairy, even though Charlie doesn't know the tooth fairy. Charlie doesn't know that whole like that they're tight or whatever, but he's also going to pull out the teeth just so they can get kind of that gag to get them up to the North Pole. So like
I
it
didn't
all kind of
like that
resolves
part.
a little too quickly, ultimately in kind of both of Charlie's arcs of like his you know his being bad and being on the naughty list, as well as like his animosity towards the principal, who ends up being this like new stepmother kind of figure, like just kind of wrapped up a little too neatly in a bow. But it's also a Christmas movie. What do you expect?
Yeah. Well, that I'm 100% with you on all that, and I think it would have been interesting if it was more of like a deliberate thing he was doing, and then that even kind of goes back into the idea of like if they had made it a full year, you could have had that like the relationship with him and the principal kind of deepening and getting stronger, and then him becoming more of the rebellious type, and then getting on the naughty list at like the
Yeah.
end of the year,
Yeah.
and like that would make a lot more like sense thematically. But to the other thing we kind of brought up, like the scene where he goes to explain to her the magic, and then they just suddenly end up at like the North Pole because of the same exact way, like because the Tooth Fairy brought that. I hate all that. Like that, I legitimately just like dislike, because like the scene where he shows her and explains it to her is like super weak, and is another one of those things of like, well, we need to get this resolved, and Scott can't do it.
Yeah.
So
And
like,
it also doesn't like, it doesn't tie into how that snow globe has been like established in this universe. Like really,
yeah,
it's not supposed to be showing her like this North Pole. It's like you shake it and Scott will be there. Scott will like show up. And you could have just used that magic. Like he's back in the North Pole, but now you're gonna shake the snow globe. So suddenly he's brought back, or he is like kind of like summoned back or something. But that like I guess they couldn't, because they wrote themselves in a quarter. They couldn't do that because he didn't have access to the sleigh and he's dealing with Toy Santa and all that stuff. So he couldn't have just like reappeared. Especially because he didn't have his magic at that point. He was like, down on the zero magic meter or whatever. So like they just kind of end up like they wrote a weak aspect of it, and and kind of like hurt like they shot themselves in the foot a couple times and
Yeah.
so that was like the best option that they could come up with to resolve that. But yeah, it's not a satisfying resolution at all. I don't think.
And because then it even goes a little bit further where it kind of goes into, again, like the ending is rushed, where it's like Scott and Curtis show up and then they immediately get captured and tied up, like without doing anything. They just get caught immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And then they immediately get freed by the kid and the principal showing up and then freeing them because of like the Tooth Fairy. And then the Tooth Fairy scene is exactly like almost exactly the same. Where he's like, "Oh, but you know, you're tough. You're the mole, and and I'm like, you just gave him this exit out of the movie, and then they were somebody. I felt like somebody like forgot and was like, how do we get them to the North Pole? And somebody was like, the Tooth Fairy, and then somebody was like, yeah, just do the same scene again. Like people aren't going to notice, right? Like,
yeah.
And then I'm with you where I wish there was more of like Scott and Curtis at the North Pole trying to do something before they got caught. And then to your point with like the snow globe, that could have been a cool thing if like Charlie gave her the snow globe and then she like disregards it and just leaves it somewhere in her house. And then if at one point she looks at it and it does like connect to Scott and he's at like the North Pole, but he's in trouble because he's caught and he's like, hey, I need you to come help me, like go get Charlie, help me, whatever. And then they show up to the North Pole. I feel like that again, it's just those things that like would have made it probably work a little bit better.
Yeah.
But again, it is a Christmas movie.
Yeah. It's a Christmas movie. It clearly the idea that we've kind of pitched of like making it a year-round lead up to that Christmas movie would have been like potentially cool, but it would have like removed from the Christmas movie nature of it. But like even there, like as we're kind of talking through that, I'm like, you could have had a moment, where early in their relationship or something, like Scott gets some help from the Easter Bunny or something like that, and you can like have them like pop back in throughout, and have those other characters kind of like pop in throughout the year. Have Cupid basically like shoot an arrow, miss, and then and Scott just say, never mind, I'm gonna do this on my own, or something like that. So yeah, like it again, like it there are elements of the movie that feel like sketches, and then there are elements that feel like they're the ones kind of building the plot, and I think both have varying degrees of success throughout the film. Like overall, it's still a fun time, and clearly, like everybody was having fun on set. But yeah, it's like even as I say, everybody was having fun on set. Like I immediately think of like I think the opening scene where like all of the kids are like just hammering whatever thing is in front of them. Like they like the props department just gave everybody hammers and just said, even if you're hammering a teddy bear or whatever, just hammer away, just hammer away at these things. That's how this stuff works. Oh, what did you think of the speaking of the beginning of the movie, the Elf Con 1 stuff with the flyover crew leading into like the introduction of Curtis because he's playing the Christmas music?
I like that. Like, I think it is a little bit of a funny, like setup piece, and then of course, like the ElfCon thing is kind of like an easy joke to throw in there. And it is kind of funny that it just like I like that they can like hear the transmission, and they're just like and it just ends up being the Christmas music, and they're just like, what is like they're in the middle of nowhere,
yeah.
And that's why I like it from the perspective of the guys in the plane who have no idea what's happening, and then like even the guy as they're flying out, he's like, should we report this? Like, and then the guy's just like, nah, I don't know, don't worry about it. Like, but it does kind of go back to another one of those things of it just kind of like the beginning just kind of being like long with like a lot of like irrelevant sketch material.
It's just like a weird cold open. It's like, oh yeah, okay, sure. They're doing a down Periscope parody, like that kind of thing, or Hunt for Red October parody or something. Like it's just a submarine parody that they're gonna do, and somebody's playing Christmas music. We got to go figure out who it is and shut them up. Yeah.
And I do like the gag there at least too, where he's like, "You're 900 years old, grow up."
yeah, it was a fun little bit indeed. And I'll be curious, when he has grown up a little bit, if they bother to explain it next time around. Any last favorite moments or scenes or anything you want to give us some love to there?
Yeah, because oh man, I know there's a favorite moment that we definitely missed. I'm trying to remember what it was. Do you have any while I try to think of that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, I ultimately I really like just the relationship between Scott and Carol, and just
Yeah.
how naturally it kind of like flows in the beginning,
Yeah.
of like, he's like, they're on the same side of like, they want Charlie to be a good kid, and Charlie's acting out, and like Charlie doesn't like that he sides with her and stuff like that, and she's even suspect about like, what angle you're playing, like because she thinks the reason Charlie's acting out is because he's not around, and it's, it is that kind of like typical, psychiatric kind of evaluation a little bit there. um and I appreciate, like, when he pitches community service as like, let's do that instead of like expelling him or something like that. Can we do that? And she's like, yeah, that's actually a good idea, sure. um and like they show up, and you get kind of like Scott, you get them just having like nice conversation, getting to know each other a little bit. He like brings her, like, because like, you don't, I mean, I certainly don't get the feeling that he's like in the like, this is my one shot, she's the one I'm gonna try and make Mrs. Claus at that point. So
Yeah.
he's like, it's more just like, he bought her a cup of coffee because they're gonna do this customers, or they're gonna do this the community service thing together. And then like the magic of the little girl kind of showing up, and him going into Santa Claus mode for her to see, and then just really everything of their date together is just delightful and charming. Like, so yeah, I just really like the relationship between them, and like, this reminded me just how much I really like Elizabeth Mitchell as an actress. Like, I loved
Yeah.
her in Lost. And so like, putting that in retrospect and seeing her in this, even though I had already seen her in this, it's like, oh yeah, like, she's really good. Like, she does a really good job in that role. Um, so much so that like, at the end when they're doing like the credit song, and she's like starting to get like in like fat Mrs. Claus suit, I'm like, oh, I kind of like it almost like, that sequence made me sad, because I'm like, oh, they're gonna lean into that for the next one, aren't they? And when they could have just had her be Elizabeth Mitchell, and she's just
Yeah.
like, she's just Carol, she's just Mrs. Claus now, and it doesn't need to be like frumpy Mrs. Claus or whatever. She can still be who she is, and Scott does the weird body transformation thing fine. But yeah, like, I just really like their back and forth kind of throughout. Was very nice.
No, I'm with you there too, because yeah, I think it is like pretty well written or well acted too, just because it's like, to your point, it's kind of like starts off natural, where, because especially if anything, they're a little bit antagonistic, and then like she kind of sees like, oh, maybe he is a good dad, and then also it is the coffee and the kid thing, and then even in that same scene, they're both like, they're making fun of those like douchebag guys that like pull in
Mm-hmm.
and like the BMW or whatever, and like the guy has the basketball shorts, and she's like, oh, I thought only women shave their legs. Like, they're both just making fun of these dudes
Mm-hmm.
for just kind of being dicks, and that's why I'm like, but see, that's another thing though, of like, now they're again like, they're bonding, and they're just kind of, now they have that like kind of in common, where they're both like, yeah, it's the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So
Yeah.
they're both like, now we're together. And then yeah, and like you said though too, their whole date is like, I think really great. Even the beginning, when it's weird, he just kind of shows up. I can't lie about that. Like, who would you just go to someone's house to ask them on a date?
Oh yeah,
Like,
no, that's definitely weird. That,
yeah.
like, at that point, he's clearly kind of made the like, she's the one I'm gonna try. I probably really only have one shot. So yeah, like, that's definitely odd. And kind of like full on stalker mode, um, but like, it
They
it
could.
it happens so quickly. They like bond over the car from whatever movie they were talking about, and like, doing that made me think that like, when they open the door, and he's like, I think you're gonna like
Yes.
this ride, I was like
Yeah.
immediately thinking, oh, it's gonna be that car. He's gonna use his magic for it to be that car, and it being his sled, and like a horse-drawn carriage instead. I was like, oh, I mean, also a very cute romantic choice, so I'm in. But like, weird to have them bond over cars like that bonding over cars moment just feels like a, well, Tim Allen was in Home Improvement and clearly loves cars, so like, that's
Yep.
gonna be like his in, and the fact that she also loves cars, like, is gonna be kind of what seals the deal for him, I guess. But yeah, that was a weird little thing. But everything after that, like, they get in that horse-drawn carriage, and it's like, yes, please.
But yeah, because that was the moment I was going to hint at. Is I love that they bond over the car. But I am with you. When he opened the door, I thought I've seen this movie before. I thought it was going to be the car,
Yeah.
and then I was like, when it wasn't the car, I was like, oh yeah, okay. And then I was like, and I guess maybe that would be too on the nose if she's like, how'd you get the car we just talked about 5 seconds ago, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But the other, I did remember the one of my favorite moments I did like going back to Judge Reinhold and Neil is it's when they're in the first like parent teacher conference with like in the principal's office, and I love that she's like, doctor, do you have any like advice here? And then the thing that made me laugh is Tim Allen is just like in the corner like moving his hand like no 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 no, like he's just kind of like he's like, no, don't give him, like, don't ask him for help, like.
Yeah.
And I it's just there's a lot of that like funny like facial stuff and like physical comedy that I think is like works well in this movie, because a lot of times that doesn't, and it's just kind of like low hanging fruit. But like that's a lot of like Tim Allen shtick, obviously. But like I thought it was really funny in this, with a lot of times with like Neil when he's just giving him a hard time, or there's even like with him and the reindeer when he was like, yeah, and the reindeers are like not very intelligent, and they just kind of stare at each other.
Mm-hmm.
And like I just like that was some things I thought were kind of funny. And
what do you think? Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry. I forgot the other moment. I had another one. I can't. Oh, it's the date. Yeah. I love the whole thing of him getting ready for the date where he has the Judge Reinhold sweater, and then because he talks before about how he's like, I was the coolest, and I had the Mustang, and I had whatever, and he ends up with like the minivan and Judge Reinhold's green Cosby like, sweater.
All right, I'll be back in 5 minutes or whatever.
Yeah. He's like, and I love that little date sequence because like Molly Shannon was such a good person to grab for that, because that is totally like her kind of role. Because that's totally just like if like the Mary Catherine Gallagher character had just like grown up and became like a Christmas lady. So like I think that's like a really just kind of like she was a great person to pull into this movie, and I think that's just a really funny scene. To your point about Cupid, it would have been really funny if they went on like a Valentine's date and Cupid hit her with the arrow and she won't leave him alone for the rest of the year.
Yeah,
like that would have been a really funny like little bit.
Indeed, yeah. I think I think that sequence is another reason of like why, especially so much of the first front-loaded part of the movie feels like sketches, is like you have a like person best known for her sketch comedy chops in this one-off scene just doing a parody song of Shania Twain but with Christmas lyrics instead. It's like yeah, okay, I guess that's a thing that they can put in this movie, and we'll probably put in the trailers and stuff like that. Sure, yeah, okay. Does it have any like impact on the broader plot? No. Apart from like here's how bad it could get if Scott just like gets desperate enough. But yeah, like the fact that she's like just there and then never seen again is like, that was weird. I do want to get your thoughts on the general like the Toy Story or the Toy Santa like subplot of what's going on back at the North Pole while everything else is while Scott's out there trying to woo Carol. What'd you think of that whole arc?
It's all right. Like because I know they probably definitely had to do something to have so he could get away from the North Pole and they could still have someone there. It might have even been funnier if you did almost like a weird kind of Weekend at Bernie's kind of thing where like he's just not there and Curtis and Bernard just have to try to like take care of things. But then you don't get the kind of I guess the plot where they need to take back the North Pole. But it's like it's not that it's definitely like a large part of the movie, but it's definitely like one of my more least favorite parts of the movie. Like the part I like about it definitely is the family dynamic and the like the dating between him and the principal. So this whole other kind of plot about like the North Pole and this guy just becoming like a weird dictator, and then like he wears the dictator costume just kind of like out of nowhere, and like they really leaned into the dictator thing in like a weird way. Now that I think about it, where he's like, I need power, I need soldiers, and then he's wearing like a metal suit, like. Yeah, and we're
just gonna give everybody coal because everybody's on the naughty list. Nobody is good, because anybody who like does one bad thing, naughty list. He's such a like it's. I mean, it's very much the like the basically like the whole AI like robots will kill humanity because to save humanity kind of thing, because that's the logical way of how that story plays out.
No, totally. Because like right as when you mentioned that, I was like, oh yeah, it's kind of like Age of Ultron, where like the AI became like sentient and learned what everyone was doing and was like, no, I have to put a stop to this. Like, and then to your point too, those kids are just hammering that coal. Like, I don't know what they're doing. They're getting it ready.
Yep.
Like, But this what the thing with the coal kind of broke my brain a little bit for like how Santa works in these movies, because like the kids make the toys, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that's just how Santa works. But we know in this world they make the toys and Santa helps them with it. Is there a coal mine operation with like elves who are in the coal mines, like mining the coal? Because coal has never been in the movie. Cole wasn't in the last movie, like, because again, like Tim Allen just being nice and giving everybody toys.
Mhm.
So I just wondered, like, they're so shocked to just like, oh, kids are getting coal, and then the coal just comes from out of nowhere, and I was like, okay, so there's like a whole sweatshop coal mining operation with these kids.
Yeah.
That like somebody needs to look into this.
I mean, it's probably, yeah, there's probably like the like there's probably a subterranean sect of elves who are out there just working the coal mines, and and they were doing it under the old regime in the pre-Scott Calvin days of Santa Claus, and Scott just like never really, like, Bernard mentioned them, but he probably just never paid them any mind or whatever, and so they've just kind of been like doing their thing and sending up coal like they're like they think they're supposed to, and it's just been going and just kind of sitting off in some reserves or something like that, and finally, evil dictator Santa says like, oh, good thing we've got all these back gears of coal because everybody needs it now. That's, yeah, sure, let's go ahead and make that the headcanon.
Yeah, no, I like that. Yeah, and so this is where we could have had more B plots about
Yeah.
like, see, to me, it would have been great if we just had B plots about like all the other like inner workings of the North Pole,
Instead
like
of the B
like
plots they
like
actually put in the movie.
right. It's like, because you brought up the SEAL team of elves, like that could have been interesting. Then you also have like this whole weird coal miner thing I couldn't get my mind off of,
Mhm.
because that's why I was like, where does it come from? Like, and all the elves are running this whole operation, so I just can't like. It's definitely that real world adult thing, and just trying to like not letting my brain go for the movie. Because the other one of the things I did think that was actually really funny is like, there's multiple jokes that, or even just lines that are meant to like build up Scott and like how good Scott is as Santa Claus.
Mhm.
But if you think about it on the inverse, they're really shitting on the other dude who was Santa before
Oh yeah.
Scott.
Yeah, no.
Like, and that makes
It's
me laugh in
it's
like kind of a funny way.
it's bad enough that guy fell off a roof and died. Now everybody's doing that thing, like, cuz it's a very common thing of like, oh, somebody leaves the job or somebody's like no longer doing the job. Everybody's kind of like, whenever they encounter a problem in that job, it's like, oh man, he just was so bad at that job. Like, you're much better now. Like, we're so glad we have you in this role. But yeah, it's like, they like. I mean, it's also been 8 years, so if they were friends with the old guy, it's like, well, they've clearly moved on.
Yeah. It just made me fascinated thinking about that other guy, and like, okay, so like how long was he the Santa Claus? Did he get a Mrs. Claus? Where is his Mrs. Claus?
Exactly,
Like,
yeah. That's I definitely have those same kind of thoughts when like that comes up. It's like, oh yeah, what did happen to the old Mrs. Claus? Like, was she just like freed from servitude when her old husband passed away? Because she wasn't there. Like, by the time Scott got there, the end of the night, that first night, like, she wasn't around. Like, we never saw her. So yeah, either the old Santa, like, was not Santa long enough to have to enact the Mrs. Claus, or yeah, some darker fate befell her.
the SEAL Team 6 elves came in.
Yeah, there you go. They tied her up in tinsel and she's sitting somewhere in a workshop, like, and they've forgotten her about her. Anyway, weird fun, like, what if kind of stuff around the Santa Claus too. Any final thoughts there before we grade it, Frank?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, I think, like, it was kind of just what we said at the beginning. Like, I think it's still a good, fun time. And I know we were kind of talking about some of the problems it may have had, or even maybe how they could have done things better. But, like, I still think it's just a good, fun movie. And, like, they nail a lot of the heartfelt stuff. And that's hard to do a lot of times, especially, like, I've seen a lot of these terrible, like, Christmas movies, especially on, like, Lifetime and
Mhm.
stuff. So, like, this is one that I think does it pretty well. So I definitely still recommend it to all the people out there.
Yeah, yeah, lots of fun to be had still in this movie. Um, Even all these years later, yeah, it's still fun. There's definitely like elements of like, okay, yeah, this is just Tim Allen being Tim Allen, or that, like, they had an idea that was like, they threw up a joke on the wall and decided to make a whole scene about it instead of like fleshing it out with other jokes. It was just like, hey, here's a visual gag and let's do a scene on that, instead of like, hey, let's actually just write a scene. There's definitely a few of those kinds of bits, but so be it. Again, I think we're on the same page in that, like, the central relationship between Scott and Carol is just like a nice, fun, heartfelt, like, romance of Santa finding, a Mrs. Claus. Maybe a little too fast for, a modern sensibility, but so be it. It's magic, whatever. That's just kind of how they write off everything on this one, is like, it's Christmas, magic exists. You'll deal with it. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, let's go ahead and grade it from A+ to F. What grade do you want to give the Santa Claus 2?
I think I'm gonna go A, because I still liked it a lot, and I still totally recommend it to people out there, especially as, like, I think this is, like, at this point, like, this is one of those classic Christmas movies. Like, this
Mhm.
is definitely kind of in that pantheon. And I think it still holds up, even though it's been like 20 years almost. But then the thing is, like, there is a couple problems with it, and the first one I think maybe is a little bit more enjoyable or a little bit more funnier from what I remember. So that's kind of why I think it kind of holds it back a little bit from being like A+.
That's fair. Yeah, it's probably B+, A- range for me. A lot of the same kind of vibes. Just like, I think we've kind of identified enough things that kind of keep it from being in that, like, upper tier for me. But it's definitely not a bad movie. So yeah, shout out to the Santa Claus 2. Um, Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this one. You have the Santa Claus 3, the Escape Clause, which, yeah, presumably we'll talk about next year. We have
I
the
remember liking that one. I just don't. I'm with, like, I saw it once at
Mhm.
least, and I just don't remember like anything about it at all. I just remember the other. Um, I forget what they're called. Like, the council of all the other like holidays is in that a lot, and I
Yeah.
remember them. I didn't remember them being in this one at all. So I
Uh,
was like, okay, my memory's all messed up.
yeah. Yeah, because that one's got Martin Short as what, Jack Frost, I think.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then he wants to be Santa Claus.
Yeah. Um, all right. Well, yeah, we also have, if you somehow only watch this one, you can go back and watch The Santa Claus, the first one. You have Home Alone as another recommendation, as well as A Christmas Carol, the Jim Carrey version, Noel with Anna Kendrick, and then two movies that I don't really know anything about: Godmothered and Prep and Landing. Presumably they're somewhere in the. I mean, Godmother definitely sounds like something magical, and then Prep and Landing might be in the Christmas spirit of things. And then lastly, our the last suggestion here happens to be next week's episode, Home Alone 2: Lost in New York. We're gonna sit down and enjoy that one. I mean, peek behind the curtain. I watched that one last night because we're gonna have to kind of record that one a little earlier, and I quite enjoy that one, and look forward to discussing it as well. So yeah, you watching anything else on Disney Plus, Frank? Obviously, you
At
and
the
I
moment,
just Hawkeye.
so yep, yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Yeah. So because we talked about Hawkeye, of course, last week. Did you watch the third episode here?
Yeah, yeah, I watched the 3rd episode, before the Santa Claus 2. I just couldn't wait.
Yeah.
So I threw that on first, and then, I thought that was actually a really great episode, though. It's, like, my favorite so far, probably.
Yeah. Same.
And I thought the action was, like, really good, especially for, like, a TV show.
Yeah.
Like, there's I don't wanna ruin it for people out there, but there's, like, a car chase that's filmed incredibly well. Like, I
Mhm.
was really blown away by how they filmed that.
Yeah, I mean, talking about that, like, in a non-spoiler sense, just talking about how they shot it. I don't think I've ever seen a movie that did like a one long tracking shot from the inside of a car in a car chase, because that's very much what it is like it. And I'm sure they're masking cuts here and there and stuff like that, but it's
Yeah.
like it's shot to look as if you're going on this car chase with them, but you're just like in the backseat of the car the whole time. And you're seeing it like from that perspective. I thought that was, yeah, incredibly like visually interesting, and something I feel like I hadn't seen before. So yeah, really good action in that. The humor in that episode, I think, really also shone and worked for
Mhm.
me. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing where that series continues to go. If you want more of our thoughts on Hawkeye, you can go check out last week's episode of That D Plus Show, where we talked about the first couple episodes. Well, that is going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, Frank, for joining me to talk about the Santa Claus 2. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Frank?
Yeah. I'll give a quick shout out to one of our other podcasts, That News You Care About. The most recent episode is you and Trevor, you and Logan, talking about some of the Game of the Year contender games that you might be able to hit to last minute before the end of the year, and some of the ones that are still coming up. So yeah, I just recommend people check that out, especially if they're curious. We're getting towards the end of the year. That's why we're in the holiday here. So I mean, if you're curious to hear about some of those Game of the Year contenders.
Yep. Cool. Yeah, you can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I will shout out our other podcast, that Nerdy Site Show, where you, Frank, me, and Cameron sat down this last week and kind of talked about some of the games we've been playing, kind of in that catch-up mentality of you sat down with Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. And we talked about that a little bit. I talked about what I talked about. I talked about Loop Hero. I talked about Guardians of the Galaxy. And then Cameron talked about Tales of Arise. We talk about Yakuza a lot, which isn't really in the Game of the Year conversation, but it's just like another thing we've been I think all three of us kind of like jumped into a little bit this year. So that was a fun, good conversation on That Nerdy Site Show. So you can go check that out as well.
Yeah, that was a good time.
Yeah. You can find all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, class dismissed, and happy holidays.